Game design often treats speed and strategy as opposing forces. Either a game demands quick reactions or it asks for deliberate planning. Synthetik 2 deliberately collapses that distinction. By forcing precise execution, tactical foresight, and irreversible decision-making to coexist, it creates a play experience that is cognitively demanding in a way most action games actively avoid. In this episode, I want to unpack what that design does to the player's mind and why it feels the way it does. Welcome to Tactical Mindscapes. At first glance, Synthetik 2 resembles a familiar category. It's a real-time top-down shooter. Enemies approach, you reposition. You fire, you reload. But very quickly, the game begins interfering with the assumptions that usually make this genre comfortable. The clearest example is reloading. Reloading in Synthetik 2 is not automatic or forgiving. It is active, timing-based, and failure-prone. Missing the timing window does not simply delay your reload, it introduces new problems: weapon jams, forced downtime, loss of control. From a design perspective, this matters. Because reloading is no longer a background task, it becomes a decision embedded directly inside movement and combat. From a cognitive perspective, this creates immediate friction. The brain is now being asked to manage spatial awareness, threat prioritization, and fine motor timing at the same time. Spatial awareness and threat detection rely heavily on the parietal cortex, which helps track objects and relationships in space, and on midbrain orienting systems that bias attention towards salient threats. Precise timing and motor execution rely on the cerebellum, which fine-tunes movement and timing, and the primary motor cortex, which initiates voluntary action. Tactical evaluation and planning rely on the prefrontal cortex, especially regions involved in goal maintenance and decision-making. Synthetik 2 does not allow these systems to operate sequentially. It demands that they operate concurrently under continuous threat. Weapons reinforce this demand. Different weapons impose different motor and attentional constraints. Some punish precise recoil control, others require strict reload rhythm. Others reward restraint but collapse under panic. This means mastery is not purely conceptual, it is embodied. You are training sensory motor circuits through repetition and error. You don't just know how a weapon behaves, your nervous system adapts to it. Item discovery adds another layer. Many items introduce conditional effects or trade-offs rather than clean upgrades. Power often comes with volatility. Efficient often comes with fragility. Cognitively, this expands what psychologists would call the mental state space. You're not only reacting to what is happening now, you're tracking internal variables and imagining how they might interact later. Mid-run modifications then lock those possibilities into place. Decisions are permanent. You commit without knowing what the rest of the run will look like. And because Synthetik 2 is structured as a roguelike, failure ends the run entirely. Every decision collapses into a single outcome. The result is a tightly coupled loop in which perception, prediction, execution, and consequence cannot be separated. Underneath these mechanics is a clear decision philosophy, responsibility over comfort. Many real-time action games soften the relationship between player choice and outcome. They introduce speed, spectacle, or randomness. When something goes wrong, failure feels external. Synthetik 2 does the opposite. It makes causality legible. When you mistime a reload, you know why. When you overextend, you chose the position. When a build collapses, you can often trace it back several decisions earlier. This matters psychologically because it preserves a sense of agency. Agency is strongly associated with activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, which helps evaluate self-generated decisions, and anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors error, conflict, and outcome discrepancy. When outcomes feel arbitrary, these systems disengage. When outcomes feel traceable, they remain active. Synthetik 2 consistently reinforces the idea that outcomes emerge from the player's own actions, even when outcomes are negative. Philosophically, the game rejects frictionless power progression. Instead, it offers conditional power. Power is available, but only if the player can reliably execute under constraints. Because as you select more powerful options and upgrades, you raise your terror level. And increasing your terror level will cause the enemies to rapidly scale in strength and power. This shifts the player's thinking away from optimization and towards stability. Not just how strong a build is, but how tolerant it is to error. Not expected value, but variance. Each run becomes a bounded experience. Players test hypotheses about builds, execution thresholds, and risk tolerance. Failure is not framed as punishment, it is framed as information. The game is not asking players to dominate its systems, it's asking them to inhabit those systems competently. Now we can talk directly about what this does to the brain. First, the need to track multiple variables simultaneously pushes working memory systems towards saturation. This relies heavily on the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which supports sustained attention, planning, and cognitive control. This produces continuous mental effort rather than brief spikes of attention. Second, irreversible decisions engage anticipatory cognition. When you commit to a volatile item or a fragile modification, the brain begins simulating failure outcomes. This relies on interaction between the hippocampus, which supports memory and mental simulation, and the prefrontal cortex, which evaluates future consequences. You are effectively running internal simulations of possible failure states while continuing to act in real time. Third, the possibility of run-ending failure increases emotional salience as time investment grows. This engages the anterior insula, a region involved in uncertainty, risk awareness, and bodily sensation. Neurochemically, this creates a distinctive profile. Dopamine, which supports learning and reward prediction, is released not in response to frequent rewards, but in response to successful execution under uncertainty. This sharpens reward prediction errors and makes success feel meaningful. Norepinephrine, which supports vigilance and sustained attention, remains moderately elevated. This keeps the player alert without tipping into panic. And of course, cortisol, a stress hormone, may rise during intense encounters, but because causality is clear and agency is preserved, stress remains functional rather than overwhelming.
on site. Code 152152.
Crucially, the game avoids learned helplessness. Because failure feels explainable, motivational systems remain engaged. Players believe improvement is possible. The psychological state this provides is not relaxed flow. It is effortful engagement, focused, tense, cognitively demanding, but deeply absorbing. Synthetik 2 is not simply testing reflexes or strategy in isolation. It is testing the player's ability to integrate perception, decision-making, and execution into a single continuous process. By refusing to separate thinking from acting, the game exposes a limitation that many designs carefully hide. Knowing what to do is not the same as being able to do it under pressure. Mastery here is not theoretical, it is embodied. When decisions are irreversible and execution is non-negotiable, responsibility becomes impossible to avoid. This game does not reward clever plans that cannot survive reality. It rewards coherence between intention, action, and outcome. That is why the experience feels demanding without being arbitrary, and why failure often feels clarifying rather than frustrating. The system is not punishing the player, it is revealing them. This has been Tactical Mindscapes. Thanks for watching.